Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, staying happy and healthy and all that good stuff. And in this video, I have lots of really odd and scary encounters of the very redacted variety. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. This is something weird that happened when I was hunting in southeastern Germany. The area that I usually hunt in happens to be close to the Czech border, and there's a lot of drug trafficking and stuff that tends to go on, but I ignore it because I'm not the police, I don't want to get involved, and I'm just hunting. The area also has a lot of folklore about people disappearing and wandering ghosts. On this particular evening, I must have been more tired than usual because I fell asleep in my hunting stand. When I woke up, it was well past midnight, and I see a single person walking across the field in front of me. For some reason, they're carrying an old-timey lantern. Now this didn't deter me much because at this point I just wanted to go home, having wasted a day of hunting. So I climb down the ladder, and since it's dark, I slip, I hurt my ankle, I curse out loud. I turn around and see the person looking at me, standing still holding their lantern. The person starts shouting, loud and slowly, "Hey, hey, hey," and just repeats it 3 or 4 times. I'm dumbfounded by this. I don't answer. After what felt like a few minutes, but I think was only a few seconds, the person just carries on walking and disappears behind the only bush in this field. Even the light of the lantern vanishes. After I compose myself, I stroll toward the bush to check it out. There's nothing there. No sign of anybody. I thought it was weird. I was a little spooked, but I didn't think much of it until someone gave me a book on local folklore as a present. It had several accounts of so-called haymen, or that's what it would be in English anyways, ghosts or demons or something else that walk around the forest at night, shouting out to wanderers. If you answer them, they rush you, in some cases beat you up, in other cases, especially a region not far from where I was, they are said to tear you limb from limb and kill you. I don't have a story of my own, but this one came from my dad. I know how some people feel about secondhand storytelling, but his story never changed over the years. He was living in Central Florida, living that redneck life as a teen. He befriended a group of, quote, hippies from the nearby university. Now, by hippies, these would mean drug dealers. So, my dad, his brother, and a couple others tell them stories of the Florida swamps and the probably cursed and very scary burial mounds there by the Native Americans. Now, it's well known by most people in the area to stay the hell away from these things. Don't screw with them, just kinda go around them. But these hippies are not from there. They're intrigued. They want to see and screw around at this burial ground. By this point, the other people have left and it's just my dad, his brother, and the hippies. They keep bugging my dad and brother to go there, but they refuse. They keep going, and after much cajoling, they agree to take these hippies to see the mounds. They head out in their swamp buggy, which is essentially a modified Volkswagen. These mounds are very deep in the swamp, so they have to park the buggy and proceed on foot. The burial mounds are found, and the hippies are being loud, laughing, and trying to make something happen. Darkness comes, and they figure it's time to return to the buggy. Not much has happened besides a few weird noises. But when they get back, the car is crushed. Totally crushed, as if from some tremendous weight. The entire roof is caved in. There's no marks on the car. There's no footprints apart from their own leading away. There's no trace of any cause. They had to walk back home after that mess. My dad and brother kinda never really associated with those people after that. And as for the hippies, they were scared enough to not go back there after that. This wasn't really the scariest thing for me. It was mainly more scary for my girlfriend. So this happened in 2013. I decided that I wanted to get back into being an outdoorsman after not being anything like that since I was 15 or so. So I taught my girlfriend some basics, and then I packed us up some bits and bobs, and then we headed out. We headed out into the middle of nowhere in Appalachia in Ohio. We backpacked for about half the day or so. It was very pleasant actually. There was nobody else around, but that was quite predictable since we were in the middle of absolute nowhere. We break camp at around 1700 or so. From then on, we spend the rest of the evening into the night just relaxing, popping popcorn, and all that good stuff. My girlfriend, though, every now and then, I would see her eyes wander over to the darkening woods. I didn't pay this too much mind because she was never the outdoorsy type, so I figured that maybe she was just still a little paranoid, because you know how people can get when they're not really used to being out in the wilderness. Other than a few moments like that, the rest of the evening and night goes fine. And we're pretty exhausted, so we decide to go to sleep. For me, it was a great day. Long day, but a great day in the outdoors. I get to sleep easy because I was exhausted, like I said. I wake up, though, at around 2:30. I feel paranoid, like something's about to peer into the tent via the roof vent. I roll over. I confirm that the gun is where I left it, and I try to get some sleep again, but I find no such thing. I find only insomnia. About 15 or 30 minutes after I woke up, I start hearing what sounds like somebody chopping wood or else beating a stick against a log. I think to myself, this is the middle of nowhere. Nobody should be out here right now, especially not this time of night. I convince myself that it's acorns dropping, so I can get back to sleep. However, I know in the back of my head that it's too loud and too distant for acorns. We left at dawn and planned and acted normal about it. A few months later, at the height of summer, we went out to the same spot and tried to go a bit further in, but my girlfriend had a heat-related injury, and she was really sick, so we left in order to stay safe. After we get home, and some time passes and she's all recuperated and stuff, she confides in me that she's very glad that we left, because the last time, she didn't sleep at all. She said that she got the feeling like the trees were watching her, or that something was, quote, out there. This coupled by the fact that apparently, while I was still asleep, she got up to use the bathroom, not too far from the tent, and she could see this massive figure, more than one, eyeing our tent from just inside the tree line. She said that she couldn't see their true size, but she could see some glints which she thought were eyes with her flashlight, and the gaze didn't feel like it was just checking us out or wondering who we were, like curious. She said it was very malicious, like it wanted to do us both harm. I don't really know what that noise was, while they were chopping wood or hitting wood against something, but the whole thing just really freaks me out in hindsight. It makes me wonder what the hell was watching our tent, and if something actually did look in the top of our tent. This story was sent in to me by Tony Fuller from Australia, so I hope I can do your story justice. Now this happened in late 1990, just outside of a small country town in the state of New South Wales, Australia. The town is called Warren, and like you would have guessed it, it's pretty much like any other little town. Absolutely nothing happens, except for when shit does happen. Everyone knows about it. Well, here in the country, New South Wales, Australia, we play a game called rugby, and it's pretty much like a religion here in Australia. We absolutely love that game, and this is pretty much the reason for me telling you this story. Because on the night this happened, we, meaning myself, my younger sister, her boyfriend, and another couple, were on our way to another town called Walgett to watch football teams from all over the state and beyond in a competition called the Corey Knockout. It's where Aboriginal football teams play over the course of 3 days until there's a winner. Well, that night, by the time we set to leave Warren and get to Walgett, the time would have been around 9:30 to 10 p.m. By the way, the football didn't start until the next day, which is the reason why we were leaving that night. The road trip started off with problems with the car pretty much immediately from the offset. We had broken down before we exited town limits, which would set the theme for the rest of the night. So we're all in good spirits and excited to be going away for the weekend, which that reminds me about the exact time of this incident. It was the first long weekend of October that year. Plus, being young at the time, 18 years old, I was drinking, but not intoxicated. I was sitting next to my sister in the back seat, who was sitting next to her bloke. Then you had the other couple in the front, with the bloke, male, driving. About 40 minutes into our trip, we break down again, which meant that we were screwed until someone came along to give us a jump start. The alternator was shot. Luckily, we didn't have to wait too long before a cocky is a property owner in the country, showed up and offered help. So since the cocky didn't have jumper leads, the 2 guys I was traveling with went with the cocky to his property to get them, and I stayed with the girls in the car. After some time passed, I got the girls out of the car, and I proceeded to light a fire off the side of the road just in front of the car. And if you've ever been camping and you've stood over a fire at night, you'll know that you can't see anything when you stand at the fire and try to look over it, because you see nothing but blackness, no matter how hard you try and squint your eyes. So anyway, the 3 of us sat by the fire, just talking about what we're going to get up to this weekend. Then, from out of nowhere, we start to hear footsteps over in the paddock, which is only a couple meters away at best, which spooked the girls, and they headed for the car. But me being young and fearless, I remained by the fire, because I was convinced that the footsteps were nothing more than a kangaroo or something, but definitely didn't expect to see what I did that night. I started to yell profanities towards the darkness. To my horror, the footsteps we heard started to come straight at me, directly from the other side of the fire, and all I could do was just stare into the black void. And the whole time I was standing there, I was truly waiting for something to reach over the fire from out of the darkness and grab me. And then, all I recall is I can feel myself falling back, and then with an almighty thud, the back of my head hits the road like a slap in the face, and I snap out of it. And all I can hear are the girls screaming at me to get in the car. As I'm getting to my feet, I'm trying to make sense of what just happened. I continue to look towards where those footsteps came from, and to my sister's face. When I look at her, I see the terror in her face. Then I glance back to the paddock, and even after all these years, I still get goosebumps. I see these yellow eyes looking straight at me. It actually felt like they were staring through me, and it was like I could feel what this thing wanted to do to me. Seriously, just describing that night scares the shit out of me. But those eyes, they were at least 8 feet off the ground, and to this day, I have never hitchhiked or been camping, which I did a lot of both back then. But I have been out pig hunting at night with friends, but only because I was armed. But when I try to tell people about that night, all I would get is a hard time for telling a BS yarn. And then all I'd say is that if you hear footsteps coming from the night, don't be an idiot and try to act tough by challenging it. Trust me, just run. Because I'm a native Australian, my people have a lot of beliefs, which my grandmother told me. That's why what happened happened. Don't be disrespectful to the spirits. So thank you to Tony for sending that in. I hope I could do your story justice. When I was 19, I entered the army. This was in Singapore, so I had to serve a compulsory 2 years. I went through basic training. Everything was fine. I found out that I was selected to be a signaller after that, so I went to signal school for about 2 months, which is in another army camp across the country. The building that we trainees stayed in was a few decades old, but not too bad. It looked clean enough anyways. There were a lot of bare facilities you'd expect, dorms for sleeping in, toilets and showers and stuff like that. There was a small corner of the ground floor for people to smoke. The first few weeks were very uneventful. We slept in single beds, 6 in a row, facing each other. But from the 3rd week on, things began to happen. Small things, but it was hard to ignore them. I slept in a bed that was in the middle of the bunk, and I faced the open windows. Our bunk was on the 4th floor, and there was a tree outside, so it never got super bright. So for some nights, I would lie down and go to sleep, but just before drifting off to sleep, I would feel my bed shudder. It was a jolt, just enough to wake me up, but there was nothing when I woke up fully. Or there would be a random noise, a fractured sound to wake me up. Imagine someone saying something unintelligible to you out of the blue. I just brushed it off as me being too tired, but as it continued to happen every other day, it was getting hard to ignore. It also meant that I slept poorly. I would later find out that I wasn't the only one, but everyone had their own experience. People just didn't want to share such things at first. I'll list some of the more major happenings. Happening 1. I woke up in the dark. I looked at my watch. It was around 1 a.m. I was about to go back to sleep, but I heard 2 people talking. I was thinking that it was my fellow bunkmates. I sat up to have a better look. There was some faint moonlight coming in from outside, so I could make out shapes. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more I realized it wasn't natural. Everyone that I saw was clearly asleep in their beds. The muttering of 2 voices went on. The more I tried to listen to what they were saying, the more I just couldn't understand it. They were not speaking English or Chinese or any other language that I knew. It was a bunch of rapid gibbering noises, but there was clearly two distinct ones. Terrified, I slipped back down into my bed. Happening 2. This was another night. I woke up again, but this time around 11:30 p.m. The room was quiet. Everyone was sleeping. Suddenly, I heard the sound of shuffling, the sound of flip-flops on bare concrete floor. It clearly originated from the room, but nobody was walking. The sound traveled from one end of the room to the other. It was exactly as if somebody was pacing the room, but I couldn't see him. When it reached the end of the room, there would be a short pause. Then, it'll start coming back again in the other direction. Determined to know that it wasn't just me, I rolled down to the side and reached across to tug my friend who was sleeping on his bed. He was annoyed and surprised to be woken up, naturally, but I whispered to him, "Do you hear that?" He didn't understand what I was talking about at first, but by the very faint light, I saw his eyes widen in the dark. He could hear it too. I said, "Who is that?" He said, "I don't know. There doesn't seem to be anybody." After a while, he shook his head and put his finger up to his lips, beckoning me to be quiet. He turned around and wrapped his blanket over him. It was clear that he didn't want to think too much about it. Number 3. All this while the bed was shaking and other small miscellaneous occurrences. They all continued every other day. The timing of them increased gradually over the few weeks, slowly ratcheting up in intensity. One time, there was a loud sound that took everyone by surprise. We were chatting and laughing normally, and suddenly, it came and shut everyone up. It was the sound of metal panes slamming shut, but nothing moved. The windows were fine. Another time, the dorm room door rattled loudly, as though somebody was trying to open it from the other side. Thinking it was our sergeants playing a prank on us, we opened the door, but we were just looking down a long empty corridor. We were only greeted by a tunnel of inky darkness. There would also be loud stomping sounds coming from above, even though the floor above us was totally uninhabited, locked off, and empty at that time. There started to be gossip, of course. Bringing up the issue to our superiors was either met with denial or deflection, but it was clear from their eyes we weren't the first batch of trainees to experience something, and I wasn't the only one affected in my bunk. A few guys had it worse. People started moving out to sleep in spare beds in other rooms, or even with other trainee batches, even though it wasn't allowed. I continued to stay, thinking I could live with it, if only for a few weeks more until I graduated. And this last time, I woke up in the middle of the night. I wanted to reach out to check the time, but I couldn't move. I was sleeping on my side, and there was an empty space on my bed. I realized I was having sleep paralysis, so I didn't panic. I couldn't move, but I could see the room just fine. I could see everybody was sleeping, the windows were open, the leaves of the trees were moving. I told myself to just breathe, and maybe I could wake up naturally. Over the course of a couple minutes, I was able to regain my movements and actually wake up to check the time. And as I was doing this, sitting up in my bed, I see something at the corner of my eye, something that shouldn't be there. Something moved in the far corner. I tried squinting at it. Something tall, very skinny, and black. It looked almost exactly like a stick figure that a child would draw with a thick-tip marker. It would almost be comical if it weren't so terrifying. And if you don't believe me, I would understand. It moved across the room, striding slowly, in a broken and stiff way, like a bad animation that was missing keyframes. It walked or limped across the room. My terror built up. I tried to comprehend what exactly I was looking at. I wanted to say something, to do something, but I couldn't. Reaching my bed, it turned around to look at me. The face was round and featureless, save 2 dots for eyes and a long, wide mouth that pulled up into a smile. It sat down in the empty space on my bed and reached out with one of its arms. It had too many fingers. I couldn't count them. They were dried, wrinkly fingers. It reached out and touched the soles of my bare feet. I could feel each finger, the dryness scraping across my soles like worms digging from the earth. With a massive effort, I broke out of whatever spell this thing had me under. I screamed, and I screamed even more. The thing looked angry, and in all the commotion of people getting up and turning on the lights, it left. There was now nothing there. I was sweating and swearing I saw something. I could still feel the physical sensation of it, like an echo that contorts onto itself. I moved out to another bunk the next day. I had enough. My mental health was suffering. Out of the 12 original occupants, I was the 5th guy to do so. There was only 3 weeks left in our training, but I didn't want to sleep there anymore. I couldn't. This incident legit turned me from half a skeptic into, this stuff is way too much for me. I am out of here. It can't be rationalized. I just don't want to be around anything that evil ever again. It's very mentally taxing to have physical training in the day and then I can't get a good night's sleep later on. I started to doubt my judgment of reality. It's totally not fun at all, especially when you encounter such things in real life. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well if you would like to donate to the channel. No pressure though. And before I go, I have another kind of funny story, the same way I did in the other video. This one is the time that somebody thought that I was a ghost. So where I live has a lot of graveyards around. Surprisingly, they're all near schools too, which has always been a little different, but, you know, it could have been just how the property was divided up back in the day. Anyway, in this particular graveyard, I have a few relatives that are buried there, and sometimes I go there just to touch up the stones and kind of clean up around, just in case that whoever the caretaker is didn't get time or whatever. And on particularly nice days, sometimes I'll sit by their graves and just chill for a little while, just kind of take in the outdoors, I guess. In this particular time, I was just sitting there on the ground, and I had closed my eyes to just kind of breathe and kind of be in the moment. And when I opened them, it was only a few seconds, there was a woman standing there. So my thought was, where the hell did she come from? And she was walking over toward me, and then I looked over at her, and I said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Oh my God, I thought you were a ghost. I thought you were dead. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." So we had a good laugh about it. But the weird thing is when she left, she went and climbed over the fence that goes into a dead-end wood trail. So that's kind of redacted, but I don't know why she would have done that, but she apparently thought I was a ghost. And then years later, I end up telling stories about them. So life's weird, isn't it? But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, then please consider liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. And with that, I think I'll see you in the next one. Remember to stay hydrated, be nice to yourself, and yeah, I'll catch you later.